I don't have a website. I don't fully promote. Most of the work, if not all the work that I get, is through my network, my association, and people reach out to me.
What do you think you're doing there? Because I know a lot of people who are very, very talented, have a great body of work, but still seem to really struggle to get the right clients.
Especially in your growth period, you really want to seek out the best people to learn, the ones that are pushing the boundaries, that are being dynamic.
Taking that move into hospitality, it very much appears that you now have the ultimate creative business.
The most important thing from my perspective is that early interaction with the client, really listening to what they are about.
Imagine if a branding consultant or an animation studio paid as much attention to someone's experience when they first have interaction with their service.
I try and put myself in the shoes of the customer and the shoes of the staff as much as humanly possible. And then finally, probably the most important thing that I think is
Today's guest is a little bit different to any of my other guests, but in a really good way. I'm speaking to Alex Ghalleb, who runs a consulting business that does multiple six figures without any full-time staff. Alex actually works in the hospitality industry, but his process and the way that he approaches business is absolutely fascinating. And when I met Alex, I knew I had to invite him on the podcast because I know you as listeners and as creatives are going to learn so much from the way that he approaches his business. If you enjoyed this episode, please do share it with a friend and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. So I guess for like context, I kind of sneak up to this roof terrace in Barcelona, which I think was supposed to be some kind of soft opening.
Yeah.
I'm sitting at the bar. I hear you chatting to the barman and I'm like, oh, he's definitely English. We get into conversation. Oh, where are you from? Oh, I studied at Leeds. You studied at Leeds. We get talking. And then all of a sudden I find out that you were involved in designing the whole bar and the rooftop and the whole experience. And so I'm like, okay, cool. And then we share some wine and some food and get chatting. And I'm like...
Tequilas.
Yeah, tequilas. And I'm like...
Natural communication.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I'm like, I need to get this person on I need to get Alex on my podcast because for a few reasons. Number one, I just think the way that you look at the world is very different and very interesting. And I think creatives can learn a lot from that about running their business. Second thing is you're basically a one-man band with a network of freelancers. And I think your average product value is usually over six figures, right? And I think that's really interesting to break down. And then the final thing is like you actually have creative roots, but now your role is more operational and you've launched a lot of food and beverage businesses in the hospitality space successfully. And for me, that says a lot about your ability to get stuff done, but also to bring a creative vision to life. So I'd love to start just by taking us back to how old were you when you were at university?
I started when I was 19.
Okay.
I left when I was 23.
Okay. So take us back to 19-year-old Alex and you sign up to study audio production?
Yeah, sound technology.
Sound technology
was the official acronym, yeah.
Okay. What do you think that course is going to be like? Why did you choose that over anything else?
I'd always worked in hospitality. We started with my dad in his restaurant back in Torquay, and I loved it for the pace, the intensity. But I really loved music. And I DJ'd around nightclubs and bars, grotty and decent, all different manner, more grotty than decent, if I'm honest. But loved music, loved sound production, studied it, wanted to be a dubbing mixer on movies at one point. So I was like, I need to go to uni. Did some homework on which one to go. Picked the furthest one away from home, as you do when you go to uni. And it ended up being Leeds. And I checked out the city and it was insane. The course was awesome. The general infrastructure for this course was incredible. So I took a swan dive into it and went for it. And it took me about 2 months of being in that course to realize that I'd stopped loving music as much as I did before I started it. I think had I maintained my hobby-esque passion for music and music generation and building speakers by hand and understanding sound installations and rooms and spaces, which then obviously translated into what I do now, I probably would have stuck with it on a more hobbyesque style type level and just explored it and got into it a hell of a lot more. I think going down the seminar route of learning it textbook by textbook, etc., despite all of the teachers and the course being fabulous, it kind of took away a lot of my passion for it. And again, in my hospitality life, as that grew, you know, I never went to uni to study that. I never went to hospitality school. I feel that allowed my creativity to be sparked by doing things that weren't necessarily being taught to me textbook style.
Yeah, so it sounds like having someone prescribing you the rule book isn't necessarily your way of doing things.
Bingo, in so many more ways than one.
Did you leave university or did you stay complete the course?
No, I finished it. I think you know, if you start something, you got to finish it. And, you know, I was like 40 grand in by that point.
Yeah. I'm going to try and get some of my money back. Okay, so you left university, and then what was the first thing that you did when you left university?
So I moved to London, and I got straight into, you know, hustling in the junior levels of being a runner at post-production houses. Obviously work in hospitality at night because runners don't get paid at all, or minimal at least. So I was doing the runnership Monday to Friday by day, and then I was working full-time hospitality hours at night.
And what was the plan? What were you trying to achieve at that point by being a runner and working that day job?
The plan was to go through the ranks, you know, as you standard do. You went from runner, and then I get promoted into the VR suite, which is like the hard drive of the post-production house, and then move into sound engineering and working underneath the head sound engineers and spending my time learning the craft. But in 2008, the credit crunch hit. A lot of post-production houses got shut down, including the one that I was working at, as BBC and other bigger TV production places were taking their work in-house. So I was kind of like, what do I do now? And my best friend, who also lived at London at the time, was in the creative industry as a marketer and advertiser. He was like, you should go and work at Soho House. I was like, Soho House? I've never heard of Soho House. I was like, working in independent restaurants and big national chains at the time. And he was like, no, you should go. And I was like, well, tell me about it. And he was like, well, it's just a really cool place where creatives go and hang out. They have business meetings, but they party, and it's the vibe for you. You know, you'd love it. And I was like, okay. And I kind of forgot about it at the time because I was working. It wasn't like I didn't have a job just because I wasn't doing the post-production house. And I remember sitting on the tube and picking up the metro and flicking through the metro, and there was this big kind of like corner of the job ads, which was Soho House doing a recruitment open day at Greek Street. So I was like, this has got to be a sign. Let me go and check it out. So picked up the phone, booked myself in, went along to this open day. Was asked how to open a bottle of wine and do all of these things that I don't think I've ever been asked in any other job up until that point. It was more like, you know, you can talk, you can move, there's a job, let's do it. And I loved it. And I did the trial, had an absolute blinder of a trial, like really enjoyed working with the team, loved the atmosphere, loved the energy of the place. And I was offered the job on the spot, and I took it. And then sadly, just before I went to start my induction day a couple of weeks later, I called up and spoke to the general manager, who was a guy called Rob Puffett at the time, really a legendary guy, like worked at Soho House for a very long time at top level. And I said to him, look, I'm really sorry, Rob, I'm not going to come to the induction tomorrow. And he was like, why not? And he was like, you were great. And he was, you're perfect for this place. And I was like, it's just, if I can say it, you don't pay very well. So I need to go and save some money before I come back. I said, but I'll come back. So I stayed at the role I was currently at. I was banking X amount of thousands of tips per month, put that all in the bank, and then 6 months later picked up the phone and called Rob. And I loved the way that he'd handled the whole process, you know, and that stuck with me in all of my future dealings with prospective recruitment. You know, treat everybody as if, you know, you really want them, make them feel special, make them feel integrated, make them feel part of the family. Because if they take the job or not, whether you give them the job or not, they're ultimately going to remember that experience, just like everybody remembers experiences. Right?
Yeah,
It's just,
and I think you can say that for clients as well, right?
100%.
You can, people think, you know, just because they don't get the sale, that's it, that's the end of the relationship.
Totally.
But it's like, how are they going to remember you? How are they going to remember that conversation?
100%. You know, everything is about, you know, memory, right? And we've all got sieves as buckets for memory most of the time. But things that really stand out are the things that remain unique.
Did any part of you worry that taking that move into hospitality meant giving up your creativity?
It's amazing that you asked me that, and because I think I've had like more midlife crisis in my life than I know anybody else has, to be honest. And like my first major one was like at that moment. It was like I was 26, just turned 26, and I was like at this crossroads. Do I go to sound engineering? Do I follow it? Do I push, even though the market is on its knees right now because of the credit crunch, and eke it out for a long time and not really get paid great money until the very end when I become an expert? But at least I'll be doing something I love. Or do I want to do something else that I love that I could probably make fairly decent money at pretty quickly if I really apply myself? But this is much harder work than this one, like much harder work.
What, the
hospitality?
The hospitality.
Much harder work, yeah. It's grueling.
Okay.
It's 24/7. It's round the clock. You want to be good at it. You've got to really push it. You know, it's non-negotiable. You can't do 9 to 5 in hospitality and think you're going to get to the top. It doesn't happen. You know, maybe if you go to a hotel school and, you know, you have great network and you can move into the right realms, then maybe that's on the table. But you've got to put the effort in. You really do. It's round the clock, irrespective of the hours of operation of the business. You know, you're a mentor, you're a coach, you're a developer, you're a trainer, you're a business runner. You've got a million different hats on. And that's probably the reason why I ended up making the final change when I was like sitting there Googling, like, what do I do with my life? Type.
Didn't have ChatGPT back then.
Yeah, exactly.
It was TED Talks and books. Yeah,
exactly. But you know, I was just like, do you know what? I work it down to simplistics of, I like multifaceted challenges where I have many things going on at many different times. And although I'd done hospitality since, you know, 13 at my dad's restaurant and loved the energy and felt very natural in that environment, I didn't want to just say yes to that because it's something that I'd done a lot more than the music, so to speak, you know, and that was the quandary. But once I'd made my mind up and got straight into hospitality, it was like the shackles were removed. You know, I jumped into Soho House like hardcore. I was like, I'm going to go all the way with this.
I'm just curious, do you remember how you made that decision? When you were like, do I go down the audio production route or do I go into hospitality? Because from an outside perspective, those two things seem very different. Like I don't feel like when I look at, until I met you actually, I don't feel like when I look at hospitality from the outside, there's any creativity in it. It just seems like everyone's being worked and grinded. Like, whereas creativity is like, oh, I'm feeling a bit tired today. I haven't had my coffee. I don't know if I can come up with the ideas. Like, do you remember?
It's like that in hospitality too. Yeah. There is a cohesion.
Okay. Do you remember how you made that decision?
I remember going down and doing the list of the things that excite me and the things that I'm very good at. And I also made a list of the pros and cons of each of the two different, you know, sectors. And hospitality just ticked a lot more of the boxes in general.
Yeah. And you'd had that experience. It wasn't like, you know, for people listening, it wasn't like, oh, I couldn't get any other job, but I was working in bars, so I decided to just carry on working in bars.
No. It was a conscious decision.
Yeah.
In all fairness, I'd been told that I could be a great lawyer by a million different like experienced lawyers. Okay. So that was in the back of my mindset. I was like, that would be really great, but that means going back to uni for God knows how many more years, you know. And I'm already aged at 26. I don't really want to do that, and then all the expense and the other bits and blah blah. But I was committed to do it if I wasn't going to be able to make a decision about the other two. Just hospitality felt right. And then when I started working at Soho House just to test the water, I knew straight away I loved that company, like with a passion.
Would you say you're quite in touch with like your intuition?
Yeah, I follow my gut a lot.
Do you?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, the gut's always right. Like 99% of the time, the gut is right. Every time I've gone against my gut in a discussion, in a negotiation, in anything where I've allowed somebody else to take the lead on the decision and I've known something specifically feels wrong about that, I've always been validated as being my gut being right, effectively.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So, and although I still go against my gut decisions sometimes, like everybody does, I'm getting better at listening to it more intently and staying with it.
The reason I just wanted to cover your background a little bit is because I think if we just started talking about what you're currently doing, listeners might not be able to relate as much to what you're currently doing just because of the industry that it's in. But through our conversations and getting to know you, it's very clear to me that you are also very creative and just the way that you think about things. So just for context, for somebody listening who doesn't really understand what you do, how would you describe to someone when you're at a networking event, hey, nice to meet you, Alex, what do you do? What do you say?
I build restaurants, bars, beach clubs and nightclubs for big hotel firms, high net worth individuals, independent clients, all over the world, internationally, across all regions.
And that's your business, and you do that as essentially a freelance consultant, right?
Effectively.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
And just talk to me a little bit about some of the background and some of the experience you had before getting into this, like the thing you were just talking about with Grind, where you left, because were you like the youngest general manager at Soho House at one point?
I was, at one point I was.
And so then you moved into Grind, and then you've had a few other kind of startups. Just talk to me about some of the things that you're kind of, I guess, most proud of in the last, say, 10 years, things that you've launched where you feel like I had a significant role in the growth or the impact of that particular business.
Yeah, leaving Soho House was super tough. I'd spent a good 6 years of my life then working hard, playing hard, a great, talented, wonderful bunch of human beings from Nick Jones all the way down. So it was difficult for me to leave. But I think when you stay part of a very, very clear, directive, cohesive, solid ethos and culture like Soho House was, you almost run the risk of only being able to bang that drum if you stay a certain amount of time. And I was very fortunate in being approached by a young gentleman called David Abramovich at Grind, who is the founder of Grind, to come on board and help him in the growth. He just secured some great investment from some wonderful investors, like super inspirational. And he wanted to grow the portfolio from the 2 sites that he had in operation with Shoreditch and Soho, sorry. And it was tough for me to make that jump because, I was so much in love with Soho House and the way that it worked and the culture and the elevation and the coolness of it all. And jumping out of that mecca into something very small like Grind, which I could see the brand potential, I could see the quality, I could see the energy, I could see the ambition from David, smart, really smart young guy. And I was taken away with it, but ultimately it was a cafe by day and a cocktail bar by night, even if the coffee was amazing and it was super cool environment and everything like that. But I could see the ambition, I could see the quality in the brand. So we talked about me joining and helping to turn the coffee group into a more restaurant bar coffee group in that order. So I made the jump and I joined at like site 3. I think they just opened Holborn at the time, and helped scale it to 12 sites across London, including its first roastery and training facility. But again, I was working with really great, young, talented, dynamic, innovative people who were trying to do something against the run of the mill. There was obviously third wave coffee with Monmouth that had already made a small splash in London or was making waves. And there was, spatterings of other third wave coming, but Grind was the one that really took it to the next level, and they were also the first that managed to successfully do cafe by day, cocktail bar by night, which is not an easy thing to do. You design, and this comes into creative learnings, you design places for your main business operation, right? So those early cafes, albeit Shoreditch, Soho, Grind, they were designed specifically more for the daytime, even though they wanted to do cocktails at night. You had a cafe counter, you had 2 big massive coffee machines. It was very obvious it was daytime. So even though we were doing cocktails and it was kind of working, it was not high performing in those periods. And what we learned as we made all of the mistakes in the universe as we were growing, we were young, we were trying to push boundaries just for the sake of pushing boundaries in some ways, but we also wanted to make great, cool spaces that made money, obviously. We started to learn a hell of a lot from those mistakes, and we started to realize that something as simple as doing a cafe counter designed like a bar, we weren't losing any of the daytime sales of 1,500 coffees a day, drinking and takeout. But we were boosting the nighttime sales. In fact, we boosted the nighttime sales so much we were almost as busy at nighttime in some of our venues that we were in the daytime. And that's when we managed to get a big swing. And that's when the tidal wave of growth really started to take on. We still got some things wrong, especially when we were building certain restaurants, namely like Clark and Well Grind. That was a real tough one. We overspent on the budget big time with that one. We might have got the layout slightly wrong. We might have got fully excited with our own cascading success in how we designed the kitchen and the strategy around the site. But it was still beautiful. It still was very successful in a lot of its own rights, but it was difficult.
And what was your role there?
So I came on as senior GM to start off with, and I was very fortunate to be offered shares, and I became ops director and the lead number one about a year and a half, 2 years in, and built the team from 23 employees when I first started all the way up to 258 in the operation, I think, by the time I left. It was hard work, really hard work. The difference of going from a well-established, well-oiled, highly infrastructured company to a startup is exactly that. You don't have any of the other elements when you first come in. You know, you've just got your grit and your determination. And although you have the knowledge about what that infrastructure looks and feels like, implementing it is a completely different ballgame. You know, you've got to go through strict rigor, process, repetition, you know, and really kind of keep plugging away until it becomes routine for everybody. And I think, you know, the operational side becoming such a fully intensive part of my life throughout that whole period of growth, and making all of the design development mistakes in those early periods really helped me learn how to start becoming a little bit more of a mature restaurant, bar, cafe concept creator that I started to become as time went forwards.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that stood out for me is that it very much appears that you now have the ultimate creative business, like probably way more than if you had gone down the audio production route, because you literally are taking like ideas about something and bringing the whole thing to life. Am I right?
Yeah, effectively, yeah.
Just quickly before we talk about now, what then happened after Grind? Because you've had a couple of other kind of what I would class as big successes or things that if you put on someone's portfolio, they go, we need to hire Alex. Do you want to just give us like maybe one or two other kind of career highlights?
Yeah. So I left Grind when I had my first son. Wanted to spend a bit more time, as you do, especially when hospitality ops is 24/7 and all round the year. And I oversaw a 3-site group in West London for a small period while we were building impetus to open up our first restaurant in Gold on Portobello Road. So Gold was one of my all-time successes and probably one of my fondest memories. Created it with a chap called Nick House, who was like known as the king of nightclubs, from Mahiki Whiskey Mist type fame and success. Really fascinating guy. Very strong in like brand and marketing. You know, he'd done it so many times with nightclubs, and that marketing and promotion is what nightclubs feed and live off, you know. So he was very well trodden in that field, which wasn't necessarily my wheelhouse prior to that.
But a good combination, because you're more the operations and he's more the
amazing, yeah. And his network was great. So he was great at driving quality people, the right people to the venue. And, you know, I was hopefully, touch wood, pretty good at executing and making sure that vibe continued once they were brought through the doors. But I was very lucky in being able to hire an amazing team. We got a fabulous chef. I got a fabulous number 2 in Ares. We had a great team from the top down. Bar, kitchen, floor, everything. All of the bits were sewn up. The reception team were awesome too, you know. And we created a real vibe. You know, the food direction was unique at the time, and the restaurant, when we opened, we were smashed busy from the beginning. We would do 250, 300 cover services, you know. But as soon as the open kitchen lights went off, the floor plate of both floors of the restaurant, and sometimes 3 floors with the PDR on the top, would turn into a members club, you know, a non-exclusive members club / nightclub. And it was just electric. And that first year was impeccable. I mean, we couldn't do any better. We were doing 3,000 guests a week. We were doing some amazing revenues and some incredible profit conversion. It was a real success story. And then obviously COVID kicked in, which whipped out the legs from everybody, in all fairness. You know, everyone had to backpedal, realign, think about how to keep the business show on the road, so to speak.
Yeah, and what did you do during COVID? Because obviously hospitality was one of the biggest sectors that was impacted.
Yeah, it was tricky. I mean, we We were obviously closed solidly for about 6 weeks. Then we started to do the takeaway at home type thing with 1 or 2 chefs and a person front of house. And then we were doing drinks out to the street, and then it became like a street party outside, which was obviously a nice time because everybody really needed to get out of the house during that period. And then 3 months after the first lockdown hit, we reopened very well. We opened only for 5 days, but we were straight back into, more than half of our original revenue per week. So straight back to profitability within the first week, effectively. So it was good. But it was during that time that I was getting a lot of consultancy requests from a multitude of different people, from well-trodden, successful hospitality operators to people who are thinking to venture out, to people that were wanting to do dark kitchens, to property developers that were looking to try and activate spaces that were otherwise unactivated or difficult to. And so I thought, well, actually, maybe this is a time to pivot. The industry, it's obviously had a tough 3 months, but it also felt like that was going to extend for a lot longer. It didn't feel like it was going to just snap back into normal state of play overnight. It felt like something had changed in that three-month period. The mindset had changed. And we're still feeling it now, if I'm honest. And the mindset shifted completely across the board for most people. So it just felt like the right time. And going back to that gut instinct and feeling, it felt like the right time to set my own business up. So I set up 5 Graces, obviously with zero background or understanding on how to operate in this freelance consultancy concept creation type mindset. And I got lucky with quite a few gigs, to be honest, from a multi-experiential outdoor COVID robust concept that was kind of like a modern Tel Avivian brand called Chameleon at 1 Marylebone, to a dark kitchen concept for a property owner in Notting Hill, to the first new restaurant concept to be launched at the prestigious Marbella Club Hotel in over 30 years. So I had a really nice mix, and that was my first 9 months. I already had 4 different projects. So I was like, okay, this is either like, beginner's luck, or there's some real possibility here.
Yeah, it's interesting. So you had a lot of inbound.
Yeah.
Why do you think you had that inbound? What were you doing in those roles that made your reputation precede you and people want to reach out?
I love what I do. I think you have to love what you do more than potentially the money that you get the benefit from. You've really got to enjoy every element of it, even especially the tough times, because everybody has those. You've got to really revel in those, almost get comfortable in the uncomfortable, so to speak. And I think in hospitality, you have to have this like positive paranoia mindset at all times. Even when things are good, you need to be worried about why they're good and like how to maintain that good growth pattern. Like all business, I suppose, but with hospitality, it's every second of the day. You've got to be worried about what's going on at the door. If you're not actually got sightline of the door, you've got to be worried about what's going on back of house and where all your staff are, or the sound of the music, and making sure that we've got enough stock and that everything's been tasted in the kitchen so that everything is consistent.
You're good at that.
What?
Making sure everything's been tasted.
We tasted a lot of food there, that's for sure.
But that's what caught my attention, I think, about you, is because I could see you paying attention to all of those things. Yeah. So I just assumed that you were like the GM for that place.
Yeah.
But you have that level of obsession for your clients, not just, so is that fun? Like, it sounds stressful to me to be constantly thinking about all those things.
No, I don't. I mean, there's an element of stress. Like that positive paranoia is an element of stress, but you need to be on it. Everything is about, people say that the details don't matter. The details really matter. The details inform the structure and how everything feels, and also separates it from the masses, and every moment is important, because if you take your eye off the ball for 5 minutes, somebody could have been waiting for 5 more minutes than they should have been waiting, which ultimately drops down the level of quality. And you don't have to be a Michelin star, hyper expert or top establishment in order to notice those things. It's about that vibe. It's about that feeling that we talked about, how people feel, and we all feel and perceive things differently. So in order to make sure you've got a pretty damn good capture, you need to be on all elements at all times, and to go back to that point that you just said, when I'm consulting or opening a site or creating something for my clients, I'm creating it to give them the best possible chance at high performance, and I want to deliver that. I want them to have that. I want them to enjoy it, even if they have a lot of conjecture to certain elements of creative flair or some points within a concept presentation deck, or the way that I envisage the strategy for a certain element that they want to interject, impede, change, or just go along with. Whatever it is, I want them to be happy with the process, and I also want them to be happy with the outcome, and in order for that to happen, I need to be on all of the details all the way through. Not like a micromanager, though. It's important not to be a micromanager. You have to allow people to feed in, particularly from the client's perspective, but also within the respective consultants that I bring into every single different project.
Yeah. Without going into like detail of every single stage, can you just explain like who typically seeks you out as a client, and what do you actually do for them?
I'd say the majority of the 6 clients I have right now, they're hotel companies, from super luxury to premium casual or lifestyle type affairs. But I get some independent clients too. And I don't have a website. I don't fully promote, to be honest. Most of the work, if not all the work that I get, is through my network, my association, hopefully through my reputational recommendation to other people within the field, and people reach out to me. It's very much an organic style type business. I haven't, in the 5 years I've had the business, I haven't had to actively business develop. I try to keep a good network as much as I possibly can. I try to be as good a human being as I possibly can in the hemisphere. But ultimately, I want my work to do a lot of the talking. I want my interactions with other people to be collaborative, cohesive, but also, to deliver. And I hope that I do that as much as possible.
What do you think you're doing there? Because I know a lot of people who are arguably very, very talented, who have a great body of work, but still seem to really struggle to get the right clients coming to them. So like, what do you think are some of the, like, if you had to teach a younger version of yourself who was about to come in and start their own business, what do you think some of the things that you do that mean that you don't really have to do business development, that mean that you always have opportunities, and not just any opportunities, like we said earlier, these are like 6-figure opportunities, right? And you're getting several of these coming to you at once. What if you had to try and zoom out objectively, what do you think some of the key things are that you're doing in your business that attract that kind of client and that kind of opportunity?
It's interesting. I think there's lots of different things that play into the fact that I'm lucky enough to not have to BD at this moment in time. I'm sure things will change. I'd never take things too for granted. But I've been very lucky in at least the growth or the development phase of my life to have always been in the right brands at the right time, working for the best people, and I think, especially in your growth period, you really want to seek out the best people to learn, the ones that are pushing the boundaries, that are being dynamic, that are passionately leading the way, whether it's for the industry, for themselves, or for whatever reason, but they have serious quality in what they're doing and clear vision. When they've got clear vision and they're really adept in bringing in other great people to make that vision come together, it's very easy to pick up the best qualities of those types of environments. And I think as long as you apply yourself within those environments, you very easy get brought into that type of network. And
okay, so there's a few things I want to dig down to there, because that's a really solid principle. Question I would have if I was listening is, A, how do you find those people? And B, how do you get your foot in the door?
We've all got to be likable to a certain level, right? There's an element of interest you have to show when you're going for certain elements. But if you're really interested in a certain sector or a certain division of the world, then eking out the brands that are the best is very easy to see. I mean, if you're really interested and you're really incepted, you very easily see the ones that are leading the way. And talking to people within that network is where you get the inside track. And then, surrounding yourself and including yourself within those networks is a lot more organic than it feels, but you have to be out there.
Yeah, I think there's a big point here. I part of the process when I start working with a creative studio is what is their niche? Like, what is the thing? And a lot of people have resistance to this because they're a branding studio and they've worked with a real range of clients, but they struggle to get this traction. And in my experience, when we niche them down, especially based on what they've done in their life and their interests and the things that they're really passionate about and the things that you're like, if you could only work with one type of business in the next 10 years, what would be the business that you would choose? If they can really articulate that and then go for that, their business just takes off, because it's like what you're saying. It's like when you're immersed in an industry, and when you're immersed, it doesn't even have to be a particular vertical like hospitality. It can be a combination of things. So like one of my clients works at the intersection of music and technology. So his brands are like Spotify and Sony Music and things like that. But he's just immersed in it every day of the week. So it's clear to him what brands are doing well, and it's clear to him what conferences he should be going to.
Totally.
Whereas I think a lot of people struggle because they've got such a broad portfolio of work and clients that they're not really kind of known for anything. They're not really immersed in anything. One week it's tech, the next week it's finance, and it all comes a little bit convoluted.
I would follow the ones that speak to you.
Yeah.
You know, you have to follow the ones that really they resonate with you. And I think you know, Ennismore, Soho House, they all resonated with me. You know, Grind resonated with me. There was something about it. I was like, this is standout. There's something different about the way these guys think and operate, and I like that.
Would you say you're somebody that typically seeks out opportunities, or somebody where opportunities typically come to you?
Oh, it's a combination of both. You know, you'll always hear that, oh, you make your own luck. And I believe you do, you know, but there's a certain element of following the white rabbit, you know, and keeping your eyes open and, you know, being open-hearted and listening to interesting things and seeing things. You know, if you're out there and you're experiencing, it's like people that are well-traveled in the world. You know, they understand cultures, mindsets, different personalities, different ways of viewing the world, much easier than those who have stayed static in one country their whole life.
Yeah, and I think it's another problem when talking about environment. Like, you're out every week, you're meeting people, like the industry you're in, you're physically out there meeting people, opening doors. I think a lot of creatives, especially the sort of designers amongst them, are really kind of stuck behind a screen all day. And so they're trying to fiddle around on LinkedIn and all kind of connect to this person, but you're just a name on a screen.
Versus, it's very difficult that way.
Versus the personality and getting out there. And now that we don't have COVID, it is easier to actually get out and network in person.
Yeah.
I want to just switch gears a little bit, because I want to talk about a few things that I think are very, very relevant for creatives, and I'd love your insight on.
Sure.
So the first thing is, if I want to start landing 6-figure projects, what's the difference between a 6-figure project and a 5-figure project for you?
I mean, for me specifically, it's all about the scope, right? The scope is like a concertina. Sometimes, you know, some people have a certain budget, some people have a certain vision, and it really depends on which one.
So if someone comes to you with a budget and it's like 30 grand, and you're like, this is what I want to pay, do you entertain that, or you just say like,
I'll probably say that I've got the perfect person for you, and I'll link them up with somebody who'll be able to execute that better.
So again, that's another example, I think, of like building a positive brand and reputation in the industry, rather than just saying I can't help you. It's like, let me see if I can help you. It's not going to be me, but let me see if I can help you, and that kind of like positions you in a certain way as well. Yeah,
totally. Yeah, I think it's important to understand what you want out of your business operation and the strategy behind it. You know, if you want to do like mass volume, then you're going to end up bringing your costs down a little bit. If you want to do like 2, 3, even up to 8, depending on what your division or your abilities are per year. You know, maybe you've got a family and you only want to work a couple of days a week. I don't know. It depends. But as long as you have a clear vision of what it is you want to do and what makes you happy and proud of the things that you do, which is vitally important in my mind, then you choose that business operation. And then based on your experience, are you able to deliver those things? You know, and all of those things are multi-layered and cohesive.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about the process, because we were talking about that earlier, and I think it's really important. Like, someone comes to you and they're like, right, Alex, we've got this vision. And you say, okay, cool, here's my process from start to finish.
Sure.
Do you ever get people saying, oh, that sounds great, but we've already got the team and we know how to hire people and we know how to do X, Y, and Z. Can you just do this bit?
Yeah. I get it all the time.
Okay. And what's your response to that?
As I'm sure most of the listeners who have their own businesses experience, every client is very different, and also they're also very, very similar in a lot of different ways. And I think It all comes down to the scope factor. If it's a client that says, yeah, okay, we've got a really, really experienced operating team. So like in my division, really experienced operating team, we just need concept. I'll be like, that's fine. We can do that. No problem at all. I will always break it down, or at least my proposals, into 4 different levels. So my standard full project scope will be broken into 4 stages. It will be brand immersion, market research, find the niche opportunity, concept presentation. That's the first piece, right? So that's basically the full strategy for this project, let's say. Once that's signed off by the client, oh, amazing, if I'm lucky. No, it's really good. We kind of like it. Move forwards. We go into the project development piece, which is stage 2. And that will be informing or briefing in all of the relevant project consultants, from interior designers, interior architect, project contractor, and some of the long lead items like maybe branding agency, maybe uniform design agency, et cetera, all based off that first piece of chunky, massive work. But they will all get a clear brief, right? They'll all understand exactly what we're trying to do with this. They'll know what the space is. They'll know effectively what a general floor plan layout will be, because that's what I'll have done. They'll have seen the food from the sample menus. They'll have seen a uniform, brief, direction, mood board, etc. They'll know the brand. They'll know everything about the storyline, the reason behind it, the market research. They will all be informed with strategy. So they're all day 0 informed the same way. Then I'll work directly with each of those different contractors to shape their interpretation of the brand, as everybody will have a different perception on every element of it, and help shape it so that it feels cohesive to the concept and bring it into reality, even, with the kitchen and bar contractors down to the finest details of which side of the doors are the hinges, and, what's the depth of the shelving and how far is the reach, et cetera, to the finest details. Before then going into stage 3, where, we kick off the senior management recruitment for these concepts, pivotal, probably the most important people in the entire process. Because, we can build a great concept, we can build an amazing strategy, but if you don't hire the right people that really understand it, that take that brief on, take that immersion from myself and their employer and execute it, then it's all over and diluted within 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And then we go into the concept development, where the ideal world, those senior people are in the process with the culinary consultant and the mixology consultant that I bring on board specific to each project or concept. It's never the same people, or very rarely anyway.
Yeah, and that's every creative's challenge, right? Because you said that just then, which was like, we can do a great concept, but if it's poorly executed, then it's not going to work, right? And I think a lot of creatives fall into that trap, because someone might commission them to do an animation, for example, but then the animation sits on their website and they're like, yeah, it was nice, but it didn't really bring us any return, because they don't have control of where it's being distributed, where it's being used.
Yeah, not at all.
So how do you get control of the full process without becoming a full service agency?
I would say that I don't have 100% full control, ever. It's never 100% in my hands. I think that if you listen to the clients enough and you analyze the project, the brand, the locality, and you really put a hell of a lot of focus into the strategy and getting right to the designated target customer, because we want it to be high performing. Yeah, no one really cares that much other than the strategy. Apart from maybe some hotel firms might want an amazing restaurant to upscale the value of the property, as an example, right? They're not necessarily bothered about the high performance on a day-to-day, but that's rare. Most people want high performing all the time. And in order to do that, you need to understand the right demographic in that locality and the opportunity to maximize its potential. If you get that bit right, and there is a lot of sound reasoning behind that, that's easily transferable and relatable to all of the relevant people that come on board afterwards, you have a much higher chance of being able to execute that high performance than if you don't.
And the way you're describing this to me now, are you describing that to the client? Is that what you're saying in those initial conversations?
For sure.
And do they ever try and bring you in when it's too late, where they feel like that strategy has already been done or worked out?
Yeah,
and they just...
that happens a lot. And then we just have to try and maximize the performance of where we're at. It's a case.
So you don't ever go backwards.
It depends. I mean, like, everyone's got different sizes of budgets, right? If they've got an endless pot, then let's scrap it all and start again. But it really depends. Everyone brings me on for different particular reasons, mostly the same, but different in
what are the things that you do? Because predominantly the ones that we've spoken about, you seem to have pretty much end-to-end influence, if not control.
Yeah.
What's different about the ones where you have full control versus the ones where you just get brought in for that little section? What are you doing differently? How are you approaching the project differently?
It's very important. I'm working for the client, right? Then they're not hiring me to just come in and do the me show. Most people say that at the beginning, but really they want to have as much involvement and immersion as possible. And rightly so, they're paying for it. So they of course want to be involved. And I want them to be in that evolution of it. And that's really most of the time quite the fun bit, because I might start with an idea based off of some sound research and some strategic thinking, but the evolution of the concept actually becomes better when there are more people feeding into it too. And that's why I love what I do specifically, is because every single project is different, every client is different, and also the relevant consultants that I bring in for the tender process to execute concept, product, culinary and mixology, always different. And they're different because everybody has their own style of product. Everybody needs to have their own marketable pull from a culinary and mixology perspective. If I pull somebody in from, a mixology guy from, from Asia to a project in Barbados, they may not have the same integration as somebody from Barbados who's, making a name for themselves and that the locals relate to, or even somebody from America where there's a lot of that kind of traffic of trade coming into Barbados to enjoy that concept, as an example. And with bringing those different relevant people in, they all have very, very unique ways of looking at things.
So for clients, like, that's great, Alex, bringing this person in from Asia, I like the idea. But honestly, we've got Jeff. He's worked here for 20 years. He makes great cocktails. We're just going to bring him in. How do you handle that conversation?
I love to work with people, right? So irrespective of whether Jeff is probably not the most marketable human being in the universe, but is without question very passionate. It will be about bringing them into the mix, but I will talk to the client as if to say, it's not just about bringing in a mixology consultant for the sake of spending some more money. It's about elevating your product quality by bringing in their 20 years of expertise at the top level and bringing a whole different way of thinking and operation, which ultimately will probably end up improving the rest of your portfolio because of those new teachings and techniques coming in to otherwise an experience level that is way, way, way behind where they've been lucky enough to grow in, But on top of that, we'll be able to use them as a marketable and PR pull. Now, it's great, like I said, creating these concepts with the right strategy, but really the pre-work is the easy stuff. Everyone might think that that's the difficult. It is hard, it's complex, but the really hard work is the minute you open the door, because the minute you open the door, you've got to be full focus, you've got to be on point, you've got to be with your team, you've got to be making sure that they are doing everything, that they are G'd up, that they are in the right mindset, they're well informed and trained, that they are piping, Mistakes are going to happen as per every single business, but you need to minimize those in order to make sure that you have a beautiful growth trajectory and you're held at high regard by all people that experience it. The marketing and PR is fundamental. It needs to be thoughtful, it needs to be integrated with the concepts, it needs to be authentic these days. It needs to speak to the demographic correctly and make the restaurant or the bar or the concept almost in a human in a way. It needs to speak about that culture, which everybody can then relate to before they've even had a chance to come and enjoy what quality you're going to deliver and in the vibe and the atmosphere you're going to do it. So, all of that engine of pulling the right people in, that day-to-day slog of making sure you're talking to the right people, bringing those people in and then being executed properly, it's 10 times harder than doing all the stuff that I do.
How much of this that you're saying to me are you directly saying to the client?
I'd say 80% of it.
Because I think what I'm noticing is I'm sold. I don't know anything about the industry, but the way that you describe it, and that's kind of what struck me when we had that first conversation, is you obviously have a way with words, but also it's clear that you know your onions. It's clear that you've had this experience and and I think maybe what's happening here is you just have the confidence to give the client direction. Whereas I think a lot of people that I'm maybe coaching initially, they just lack that confidence to speak up and say, guys, actually, the last 10 campaigns we worked on, that just didn't work. They're too afraid of maybe the client pulling the plug or saying, well, we don't agree with you, or I don't know. What's your kind of perspective on that?
Sometimes people forget that, they've spent their whole life working in an industry. You really know your stuff. If you've really been focusing and pushing and really trying to learn as much as you possibly can. A lot of the stuff that you learn without even thinking about it. It's just experience. It's the day to day. But it's very important in making that experience relatable and understandable and relevant to your client so that they understand, because, like we said, everything is perceived in a different way. So you have to, the most important thing from my perspective is that early interaction with the client, really listening to what they are about. You start listening to what they're about, the things that they enjoy, the things that they like, the things that they are interested in, because everybody's got different things that they're focused in. And we're not just talking about the project ambition or vision here. We're talking about what they really relate to and tapping into that and helping them to understand your point of view through understanding what twigs their interest.
So you're always kind of framing it in relation to what they want and what they're trying to get more of, rather than just like, well, this is my process. I know the best. Totally. I know how it's done.
Yeah, no, that's the wrong way to go. You're putting walls up straight away. And obviously, I probably had a lot of that in my early days as a freelancer, consultant, advisor, whatever. But what I've learned, and I learned a lot of this from my good lady, actually, because she's wildly smart and very good at dealing with her clients, like possibly the best I've ever met in my life. And I'm fascinated listening to her sometimes, most of the time. She taught me to work for the client, and I was like, it's fascinating because the client is really my customer. I've obviously got the customers, of the concept that this needs to work with. But the customer is my client, so I need to give them a service where they understand exactly where I'm coming from and how we can maximize their business and minimize the cost that they are going to hemorrhage in building this thing, and also the first kind of like growth phase where we need to get to profitability operationally as quickly as possible, And the ideal scenario is month 2, and it's totally achievable, but everything needs to be in sync and everybody needs to be gunning for that same viewpoint.
It's clear to me you have quite a direct communication style. And I think that combined with first listening to somebody and understanding what they're trying to achieve can be very powerful. I think where people fall down is they either go one or the other. Yeah. They're either like very direct in their communication style, but haven't taken the time to understand what's important for the client, or they've taken time to understand what's important for the client, but then don't trust their own kind of judgment, I suppose, or process in order to actually guide the client. So I think those two things in combination are really important.
Totally.
Just talk to me for a second about how you view the client journey. Because one of the first things I thought when I thought, I need you on the podcast, is I like looking at the way people do things in other industries and seeing how I can apply it to the industry that I'm in, which is the creative industries. And I thought, wow, imagine if a branding consultant or an animation studio paid as much attention to someone's experience when they first have interaction with their service all the way through to when they become a client. I wonder what that would do to their like client retention and all of that kind of stuff.
Power packet.
Yeah. So talk to me about some of the ways that you think about a end consumer. So not your clients, but an end consumer walking into a restaurant or a new place you've just launched. What are you looking for? What's your brain paying attention to? What are some of the key principles where it's like, if we get these things wrong, we have screwed this big time?
Well, I mean, Five Graces, my company, stands for 5 senses. It's an Eastern concept around the 5 senses. And I think, everybody in the universe has attention to detail of some differing levels, right? And everybody sees things that aren't quite right. And I try and minimize the eyesores when it comes to aesthetics and operational equipment and other bits and pieces. I'm not just thinking about the customer, I'm thinking about the staff as well that will be working in this space and how to coalesce those two beautifully so that we get beautiful spaces that staff, 1, are proud of, but 2, don't feel like they're going to war on just to work on the basic stuff, I try and put myself in the shoes of the customer, if I'm honest, and the shoes of the staff that are going to be in these spaces as much as humanly possible. And I run through the scenarios, the if this, then that, of, okay, if that scenario happens, what are they going to see? What are they going to feel? How are they going to do those things? And you work backwards and you try and problem solve. And it's almost like a Tetris game of trying to minimize, because every single site is never going to be perfect. You're never going to get perfection, Try and minimize the difficulties.
I think creatives in general, and I'll say this for myself as well, are like so bad at putting themselves in their customers' shoes. I'm lucky that I came from a kind of marketing background where I was taught that early on. But I think if I hadn't been exposed to marketing and to that. I just would be so focused on the creative. I remember when I first started building websites, I was so focused on like, do I think this looks good?
Yeah.
Am I proud of this work? Like, am I proud to put this out in the world?
Yeah.
I didn't really think about how it's being perceived by somebody else. And I remember even in the web world, these kind of accessibility issues were like such a pain in the arse, you know, like, oh, it's got to go to the QA team to see if it can be opened in like Internet Explorer 6 or something. I'm like, why does anyone care? But they care because there's someone still using that web browser, and how does it look in that? And so I think that's a really important shift for creatives to make, is like, what is my client experiencing when they first get on that call with me? They don't have the same knowledge that I have. They don't know anything.
And that's a fundamental flaw. That happens a lot in all different industries.
Yeah.
I was having dinner with an old friend of mine last night who's been working in development her whole life. Wildly smart girl, manages enormous teams of men, so that's a challenge in itself, but building huge developments, residential, commercial. And last year, she pivoted into the world of operations, where they are effectively managing. She's running a team of people that manage these properties. And she said it was the biggest eye-opener, because up until last year when she took this role, she was always doing the development piece, you know, the design, the build, the construction, multi-level organization, yada, yada. And then she'd be done, move on to the next one, right? But the operations, since moving into the operations, she's understood exactly all of the problems from the clients that are moving into those properties, and all of the day-to-day issues from the minute they give the keys and open up like half off plan, and like the entrance road isn't finished, to, you know, the frailties within the design of the buildings, et cetera, et cetera. And she said it was just like this epiphany moment of like, holy shit, I need to, when I go back to development, because she's fully in tune with going back, it's going to make me such a better programmer of the development and wide lens creator of these projects, because I'll be analyzing it from the actual guest perspective and making it a much more polished product, and therefore being able to charge more, might I add, at the end, ultimately.
I feel like there's so many different things that we could talk about. We're sort of coming up to time. I know you're quite busy. Are there any last sort of parting words of wisdom? If you think you were talking to somebody who's really, they've got the experience, they've got the portfolio, maybe they've won some awards, but they just feel like the business is a bit stagnant. Maybe people don't see the value in what they're doing as much. They're really finding it difficult to kind of get the right kind of clients or the right kind of budgets. You know, when we're talking about 6-figure projects, they're like, man, I would love a 6-figure project. I'd love this scope. Is there anything that you want to leave as kind of parting wisdom, or anything that you feel we haven't touched on today?
Whenever you're finding it difficult, I think it's always important to strip back to the basics. Like just take one or two steps back. It might even be 20 steps back if you're going to go back to basics and you're super experienced. But I think going back to basics is always a key to ground yourself, and then have another look at the landscape ahead and reassess which is the direction that you actually really want to go. You know, forgetting the big ticket projects. I don't think there's any science to it. I think, you know, you've got to cultivate your reputation better than anything else. You know, the reputation is king in my book. You know, it's really important that you deliver for your clients, and you over deliver in a lot of ways, you know, without it obviously coming at a negative cost to yourself. But blowing expectation, raising the game, you know, nothing is too much trouble, but also at the same time, without making this final piece confusing, you know, knowing where the buck stops, you know, and being very clear in what it is that you're going to deliver from the beginning, and how that process is going to go, is wildly important. And then finally, probably the most important thing that I think is just ensuring that you give your clients trust. You know, they need to trust you straight away. They're paying, so they want to make sure that this is a sound investment and they're going to get what they hope they are going to get, you know. And if you can achieve that trust factor from the minute one, then it makes the rest of the project seamless, and it should be, you know. And I think regular touch points, clear communication, delivering on deliverable target dates, not allowing them to run, you know, they're fundamentals, and we all do that. I'm not devoid of that. I definitely run past target dates from time to time, but it's very important to stand by what you promise your clients. And if you can give a bit more than what they're expecting, if not a lot more, then you'll always have a good reputation to stand by.
Amazing, dude. Thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you for dinner, and thank you for all of the things that you've done so far. And where can people find out more about you? Where can people connect with you if they want to have a conversation?
LinkedIn. Alex Ghalleb is my LinkedIn. You can check me out there. It's probably the best place.
Awesome.
Or alex@5graces.co.uk.
Nice. Right, dude. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.